All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everybody here. And I would like to recognize the following our parish presidents and Bill A. Payne, and from Council at large A, Councilwoman Jennifer Van Rankin, and at large B, Brand Glenwood. But thank you all for coming. Better do roll call.
Or Casey House Center. Rusty Autry.
Yeah.
Jerry Boney.
Here.
Mr. Rudy. Chef Charlotte. Here. Adam Chimner. Here. Donovan Adapi.
Here.
Grace.
Here.
Ruth Lawson.
Here.
Then the Brian Lay Asson and Doug Mamo.
Here.
Here's Jim Muckel. Chance Miller's here. Frank Morris here. Bobo Place here. Charles Sornego. Yeah. Sir, chair. Peter Sparrow here. Bert Charter Bears Asson. Vincent Miss Asola here. That's a base roll.
Are there any comments to the July 5th minutes? Any corrections needed? I'm sorry, Brian. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. I'd like to turn it over now to the parish department's staff.
Thank you. So very quickly, we're going to go through each department organizational structure, starting with the planning department. For those of you don't know, Leon Betts Martin, I was the planning director. As you see, we have the director for the planning department. We have an assistant director, Miss Elena Gesser. She's sitting over here. And then we have two clerical staff, Roly and I. The planning department is essentially broken up into 4 sections. We have current planning, zoning admin, we have a landscape planner and Mantles, all of the land taken for the entire parish. So he reviews all of the site counts that are submitted to planning for compliance with the regulations. He does inspections on all of the sites within the parish to ensure that they are still in compliance with their approved site plan. And then he also answers any questions when people come in. When we have free meetings, he's on hand for those to answer any landscape questions at that point in time. So he is a very hard worker. He has a lot to do. They only have one of him in the entire parish.
Sorry, I just have a question. Is this open positions too, or is this just currently?
These are all the positions we have. So currently I believe I have 4 open positions, 3 or 4 I have to double check for. And then you have our long range planning section. So starting with current planning, this is really the section that does the heavy lifting for the planning department. They review building permits every day. They handle pre-app meetings. All the applications that come in for site plan review, re-subdivision, rezoning, any of the special committee uses, all of those applications go through our current planning section. That section is split into an East Bank and a West Bank section, so that the planners in the East Bank section review East Bank Kansas, West Bank likewise. We do have planner on duty shifts, people who are there to answer any walk-ins they may have, so those planners do answer questions for either side of the river, obviously. But we have found that this helps move the applications through quicker with this story revision. Our zoning admin section, we have one supervisor, one there, and currently an intern. Zoning admin inheritance. Any zoning termination requests that we get to someone who wants an official determination of it, they handle any zoning interpretations that we may need. They handle all zoning clearances for the parish. So when you open a new business, you have to get a zoning clearance. They review and approve all of those. And then they also sit in on pre-app EDs too, to answering questions that we may have as needed. They work very closely with our building permits department, when it comes to zone clearances that require a tenant build out. So if you're doing a change of use. Our long-range planning, that is the section that handles our studies. So I know most of you are familiar with just the industrial district study last year. That took about 3 years. That section played a heavy role in that. They also do area studies if we're looking at changing the zoning for a larger area. They input those. And then the tech studies like the industrial district study. Getting ready to do this UDC rewrite that's coming up. That section is really going to handle that heavy lifting with that process. And Amanda Paggi back here is the supervisor for that section. So, any other questions? Go ahead, Vince.
Ed, what is the approval process? In other words, if someone's applying for a permit, whether it be a signed permit or to do some build out, what's the process for approval? Does the supervisor at the West Bank, under the West Bank drop, does he or she have the authority to approve, or does that have to go all the way up the chain?
Sure. So I think we're just going to do the organizational structure now, but I think we may have an open section for questions at the end of the meeting, or you and I can discuss afterwards at fine, just so we can go over. But I can definitely talk to you about that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ramon Chetta. I'm the Assistant Director of the Building Permits Department. And as you can see, we have our Director's office. Our Director was staying, he's gone. Hopefully someone will be entering that position soon. We have our Regulatory Manager, most of you know Sal Paleo. He oversees inspections as well as plan review. And 3 clerical. The Cashier's office, they simply take payments. They handle payments, our budget, anything to do with our finances in our department. Technology assistance, you all met Ms. Latrice Alexander, who is our specialized operations administrator, who is our MPN guru. She kind of handles anything to do with the permitting system between us, building permits, and any other parish department that deals with it being. We have, of course, 2 other technology assistants, employees who handle any of our computer issues. Claim review is, okay. Our claim review section in the orange, far left, we have 2 supervisors for our plan review section and 10 plan reviewers for the entire parish. Permit techs, 1 supervisor, 5 techs. These are filled positions right now. Our GIS analyst handles addresses, entering addresses, adding and removing buildings as permitted. Electrical, plumbing, and mechanical section, we have supervisors who handle all plan review for commercial projects. They inspect as well, as you can see, mechanical. We have 1 supervisor and 1 inspector. Both of them do plan review and inspect for the entire parish, so we're a bit deficient there. Plumbing, electrical, same. Supervisors review commercial plans, inspect. Their inspectors are inspecting. Clericals are boards handling filings. Anything that they schedule all the inspections with the inspectors as well. Building section, the only difference with our building section is that the supervisors do not review plans. That's our plan review section. We have 8 inspectors and 4 clerical, and that's both East and West Bank. Any questions?
Okay, I'm Angela DeSoto. I'm the Director of Engineering. We're a little bit different from everyone else. We've got about 140 employees in the department. However, the engineering department does a lot of things that have nothing to do with permitting. So what I've highlighted here, everything within is what we do, but the ones in black, traffic, utilities, drafting, GIS, East Pack and West Pack inspections are the only ones that actually deal with ag tech permitting whatsoever. Oh, lost one. Okay, so this is just focused on what involves permitting, and this is not the entirety of each one of these departments. So within traffic, we've got one supervisor and one engineer. Those are the ones that are reviewing all of the traffic impact studies. They're doing the site distances, they're doing site triangle for both planning and permitting purposes. So any driveway, and we have site distance issues, it's gonna go through that. Utilities drafting GIS, I combine that all together. So our utility supervisor is Shannon Joseph, sitting in the back that many of you know. Shannon and his compadre, which is Jeff Wasserman on the GIS side, are the leads for both building permits and planning reviews. So Jeff's office handles all your cleanup cards, all of the initial finding out where all the utilities are. He also coordinates all of the comments from the entirety of Public Works. The engineering department represents Public Works in the review process, that we also rely upon, and you will sometimes see comments from water, sewer, drainage, and streets. Our job is to take all that, combine it together into one comment, and rectify any inconsistencies in between. We also, Just guys are also the ones that make sure that we have servitude. So if you have a piece of property, we try to move things around, and we've got utilities on your property, they're the ones that are going to reach out and say, you need to get a servitude, at which point you'll look for Parish Attorney's Office to apply that. We also have within there East Bank Utilities. That is East Bank Inspections. That's our utility office. They review inspect every single utility installation on public property. So they're not only doing your tie-ins, they're also doing any contractor that is doing a public works project. They're making sure those connections are done to standard. They're doing the water testing to make sure everything is okay. And then we also have our West Bank inspections. That's our sidewalks and driveways. We've got Vincent back here, Acosta, representing that group. And that group is all of the sidewalk and driveway permits. That is anything on public. So they're doing driveway aprons and sidewalks, not just for you guys, but if you come in and you want to replace the sidewalk in front of your house, it's going to go to Vincent for approval. So it's not only the planning permits, it's not only the building permits, it's also the everyday permits. Same thing with our utilities guys. We're not just looking at the permits from you guys, we're also looking at every utility company that comes in and puts a line in our right-of-way has to get a permit as well. It's a totally separate permitting process. So we're looking at everything on the right-of-way to make sure that you have appropriate sewer, appropriate water, appropriate drainage, and that you're not compromising another utility in order to build out your property. So we're kind of looking at this breadth and depth of the entire thing. And like I said, we've got a lot more people, a lot more engineers, a lot more staff, but they don't focus on what you guys are doing. And for Shannon and all of these guys, permits is not the only thing that they do. They do other things as well. So they're working with our capital programs as well. Any questions for help? Yes, sir.
When your vendors, whether it be Cox Cable or AT&T or whenever somebody is laying fiber optic in the servitude or the right-of-way, does the parish follow up? You've given them a permit or you've given them permission to do that, and when they tear up driveways or when they leave a mess on the site,
We do.
is somebody following up to make sure that they understand they're responsible for it and not the landowner or the tenant?
We do. And when and there's so much going on, sometimes we're not aware. As soon as we're made aware of it, we do follow up. If, for instance, we just had one where some poles were put into the right way, actually on the edge of a roadway, that we found out about, and we will revoke the permit. And if they do not comply and refuse to act in a timely manner, we'll not issue them another permit. So they can't lay another line, they can't do any more work, no more permits until you fix the problem.
And that includes major utility companies,
We can shut down
in
AT&T.
NESCOs.
We've shut down AT&T when AT&T is doing fiber optics. They kept hitting our wiring for our streetlights and caused several $100,000 worth of damage to our street lighting system. And kept on them. And finally we said, okay, it's not done. This is what you owe us in order to fix it. And until you pay us, we're not not getting another fiber optic permit.
So the different people within the parish that do code enforcement and cite landowners for things being in disrepair, if it's in disrepair because a utility company like Energy decided to put in a support pole and break up the concrete in order to put it in, I shouldn't be fined by code for that. Code enforcement understands that if it's in the utility and it's the utility company that did the damage, they're responsible for it.
If it's a new installation and are currently in the installation mode, we will have it fixed. If it's something that's been there for decades, then then I have no recourse at that point. If it's been there for 30 years, I don't really have a way to go back and fix to force them. However, we do work with the utilities through our franchise agreements in order to rectify those situations. Right now, Entergy is going through a huge effort to replace pipes, for instance. And that's the widespread, much broader picture. The code enforcement, the right-of-way issues with the utility companies are handled separately from building permits code enforcement. It's handled strictly within Public Works because we handle everything on the public right-of-way.
Because it's my understanding that the code enforcement people take the position it's in the right-of-way, it's your responsibility, the landowner's responsibility. This is the first time I'm hearing that may not be the case, depending upon the age of the...
In essence of time, we're gonna, if you want to get your conversation.
I just have one more question. Okay. The job description for the project coordinator, what is that? Resolution or is that something else?
The project coordinator and so we have two. Vincent is one of the project coordinators. All of the commercial permits, all of any kind of building permit within the sidewalk and driveway section goes through him. The project coordinator for the East Bank, they're on the inspection only side. They do not review the permits. So they're coordinating where all the inspectors are going in order to inspect each and every site to make sure that the connections are done correctly to our standards and to the Department of Health and hospital standards as well.
Okay, so resolution, we go to the supervisor, right?
Like I said, East Bank Utilities, you're not going to deal with. That they are strictly in the field. West Bank Utilities, that is Vincent, and ultimately it can go to the supervisor, but ultimately it's going to go to Vincent for execution.
Thank you.
I thank everybody for that. Moving on to our hot topics. The board got an email last month. Sorry about that, Julia.
And then we just wanted to briefly wrap up. As we mentioned when we did the flip chart in the very first meeting, we do have additional departments that are involved in the permitting process. So our parish attorney's office does play a role in reviewing planning department applications. We have two attorneys who are reviewing for subdivisions and site plan reviews. Our fire department and our hazardous materials coordinator are reviewers. Those are primarily for special permitted uses, particularly the bulk storage facilities located primarily on the West Bank. And then finally, there are other public works departments other than engineering that play a role in review, primarily in planning applications for sewer, water, drainage, and streets, but also environmental affairs and parkways. The parkways arborist is fulfilling two roles. One, they are doing site plan reviews for commercial projects throughout the parish, but they are also the major contributor and reviewer for the Metairie Ridge Protection District applications in the building permitting process, and then also those with to go through the Old Metairie Name Creek Conservation District review process. And that is it for me. Thanks, Charles.
All right, to get back to our hot topics, everybody was asked to send in some of their topics, and we received some of those emails, and some of y'all have not replied to that. And we've taken it and we put together a series of questions or that we're going to present to y'all in a few minutes. Then we'll go through and answer those, and we'll come back and have an open discussion on those topics. But looking at those, looking at the emails that we received, we kind of break it down into three major categories that I think we need to be looking at. And one is the parish, how do we have a in-person or meeting with a reviewer prior to someone making an application? I think that was, came up several times during our reviewer emails. Another thing was communication. There was a lot of talk about communication, that you put phone calls into the parish or you email them and you get no response coming back. And I'm sure that's not just one way. I'm sure when parish followed the applicant, sometimes the applicant will return their calls or promptly or answer their emails promptly. So I think the communication would be going both ways between the parish and the applicants. The third thing is the time frame. There's a lot of talk in the emails about the time frame. How long does it take the parish to review something? Why isn't it more transparent about is it posted and who's doing the review? And the same thing on the applicant side is when we get comments back from the parish. How long does it take us? Are we given a time frame on when to reply back? Those are some of the key points that were brought up in the emails. Now I'd like to put up the question is, we've got a series of questions. Look at this code. You can go ahead and scan it with your phone and you'll be able to get to the questions, and you'll click a vote, you'll answer the questions, and we'll have an open discussion at these session.
Is everybody able to access the form? Yes.
You would have gone to all.
At the edge.
So we can see who's it.
All right. Our first question was about the permitting questions that came up, and so with hand is just to kind of understand if we have a general knowledge of with the partners within the parish or reviewing our permits. So when we submit a residential permit, new construction residential permit, what departments are involved in that review process?
Did everybody vote? You're probably going to go through them all and hit.
Yeah.
And it's your minute before it's
You
going
have
to
to-
tally.
There's like 5 on a page, and you have to submit it, the whole thing.
See my flash? Do you want everybody to do that?
Let's go through the permitting questions. Let's take those votes that talk about residential and commercial. If we go through those voting process, and then we can talk about if we understand with the partners are reviewing us.
All right.
You have to do, because it's not going to let us submit. All right, so the way the form works is we're going to have to go through the whole process, so we have to answer that whole form before we get to see the results come up. Next series of questions are broken down in several topics. We have the MGO permitting system. We have a few questions about that. We go into let me get that up. So. Anybody the one more time?
Okay. All right, three more. I blue box.
Ski that show.
All right. Everybody answer the question. All right, let's start off with the question number one about the new commercial residential building permit. When it's submitted for review and permitting, what departments are involved in that review process? So 53, half of us selected the building permit, engineering, and planning. 20% building permits and engineers, and 30 on that.
I think it might be cutting off. Okay, that's
ruler had the cheat that gallery.
So the first question for the residential building permits, when you're submitting for that, you would be reviewed by the building department and engineering, which would be Vincent file, sidewalks, or any kind of driveway permit at that time. We don't trigger any other department until we move into like the second one, where we got new construction residential building permits within an overlay district. So at that point, we would be triggering the building permits, engineering, and planning department would be reviewing us to inside an overlay district. Any questions on that?
Always.
Moving into the commercial side, when we're submitting for a new commercial building permit, and there's no overlay, this is strictly just whether it's a new construction, tenant build out, anything like that, in a commercial building review, what departments would be looking at that? We don't have. So if there's no overlay district inside of it, you would only be in review by the building permits, engineering, and public works. Planning would not get involved until we have into an overlay district. Now, when we have a new construction, commercial building permits going into an overlay district, that's when all four departments that we have, the building permits, engineering, planning, and public works would be involved in that permitting process. So at that point, when you're in that district, you have all four ADC, all four departments looking at.
Regardless of whether you're doing new construction or renovation.
Renovate, it's the same thing. And
Renovation.
right. And new construction, commercial, what you're working on, if you're just on the interior of the building, you would not be going to planning, you would involve the site plan or not.
So if it's interior work, if it's a remodel inside and there's nothing being done outside, then you don't have to go through the process of getting with planning and everything.
That is correct.
Well, it can be heavily dependent upon the price of the renovations. If they exceed 50% of the assessed value, that can trigger site plan review. I think we've been through that with a couple of your uptrap member the building. But even interior renovations, if the cost of a renovation exceeds 50% of the assessed value of the structure, that will trigger site plan review.
Can we talk about that for a minute? So, if you have a shopping center that has 15 units in it, are you saying it can't exceed 50% of the value of the shopping center? Because you don't have individual assessments on each of the different spaces.
Sure. Do you want
So you can
continue with the that scenario is very fact dependent, so I don't want to answer it in a broad capacity. I will say, I believe that you and I worked together before when the assessment I felt was extremely low for the structure. We did accept an appraisal or robust price opinion to show that the value of the structure actually was more than what the assessor was showing, so that at that point in time, we didn't trigger site plan.
Very important point, Arwa, is clarity. In one situation, we had gotten a broker's price opinion, and we were told that couldn't do a broker's price opinion. We had to go out and spend $5,000 to get an appraiser. So can we use the broker's price opinion? We always have up until the last scenario.
So in that instance, the code is very clear. It only allows reassessed value. But I believe in that instance, we did work with you because building permits had accepted the broker's price opinion to sit up. So we didn't want to break with what had previously been accepted. I have concerns with that, but seeing as how we have done that before, at that instance, we did go ahead and allow the broker's price opinion we could use. I think that's something to look at in BDC rewrite, so that we had different options in the code.
All right, let's move on to the MyGov committee. And when a lot of these questions that came back in the emails were concerned about when the permit application was accepted, there should be a notification or permit application that has been accepted, and who should be given access to this portal. Okay, I know there was a lot of conversation in the email that sometimes a tenant will be submitting for a permit, and the owner of the property doesn't even know that their tenant is getting work done inside their building. And that's an important thing that the owner should be informed. But right now, that tenant could go apply for a building permit and not inform the owner. So looking at the four questions we have, who out of the four, who should be the one? Should all of them be? So right now it's kind of a split. I think that's something that when anybody applies for the permit, that there should be an automatic notification of everybody listed on that permit, whether you're the owner, the tenant, the design professional, that you would get a notification from MyGov telling you that somebody has now applied for a permit. And that moves into the question number 2 on that, is that who should be able to see those documents when they upload it. Again, that should be, at that point, we have pretty much a third across the board of it, but I think at that point, all three everybody that's listed on that MyGov permit should be able to see every document that is uploaded or any communication that goes back and forth between the reviewers and the applicants. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar, but moving into question 3, familiar with the MyGov portal and how it looks, but when you're looking at the photo, you have your project set up in there, and there'll be tags on the project indicating whether the project is under review, if the permit's been issued, the project's been closed. I think there ought to be also a indicator note on that photo, and maybe even change colors as a typical image on the photo is green. Something that says that the applicant's response, that they're waiting on us in order to respond back. Not just have where the permit's open or permit's under review, but during that process when that reviewer sends out a notice, then there should be something on there that changes to applicant's response and maybe goes reds or whatever, a color that then will be very graphic and indicating that there's something coming back. And I think the majority vote agree on something like that. Any questions on any of this so far? Any discussion that we need to be talking about? Nope.
For the who can be notified, should there not just be an option for us to add whatever emails you would want? Is there a reason why, for instance, for us, we submit all permits through one portal, so our Master Meyer email address. Should there not be an option to add the architect as a separate, as an additional person who gets notified? I would think the same for an owner. If the owner has, a secretary that they want to receive the emails as well, could there not be an option to just add additional people to notification?
I think that option is there. It's just not a requirement. So I feel like that question is more. So if anybody's ever submitted for fire marshal, they require a designer professional, an owner, and somebody as an other, which could be a contractor. A little bit different because the fire marshal, obviously, there's always going to be a design professionals. I know that you can add 10 people on NGO. If you want everybody, you give it text messages, phone calls. But I think it got to go to DE. Is there a requirement to add at least 2 people? Because right now, the way the system's set up, you usually go 1 person. I think that's what you're saying. When the tenant could pull a permit, not just not put anybody else in it. Run with it. Building owner doesn't know anything about it. Maybe you get into stuff there if you make a requirement that 2 or 3 people have to, and then someone says only at 1 or would you want bit blood? So I know that stuff. So.
Still on Myra, they have to get into secretary part then, because obviously that can break down into a whole lot of stuff. Which, as you said, Charles, before, those 3 have to teach should be in on that. They have to, because the design professional sometimes might not even be around, or he might be involved with something else. So if you got a problem with people I think it's important that part.
I agree with that, Bert. Yeah. I think you should have flexible enough where you could add people that come associated with the project at permit is issued also, because as third-party inspector, that's useful to me at the opportunity to identify the permit is being applied for. Doesn't exist. Contractor fix the permit up, and we should be able to add it, or anybody else who chooses to. Just find out. Yeah.
I'll add a nuance to that, though. So I do think always that the owner of the building should be notified, or should be, necessary to be added, design professional of the applicant. But we don't always have the contractor picked out at the time that we're submitting for permit. A lot of times they're out to bid at that time. And so you don't necessarily have the contractor that you could had if it were a requirement. So I would say that that'd be an option, that you could add a contractor, but really the people that need to know are the applicant and the owner of the building. So the applicant could be the design professional, could be the tenant,
But at that time, about I understand that we don't go to our contractor. We may be bidding a project, and we haven't made that selection yet on that contractor. So that is either left open, or sometimes the architect will put his name in there as the contract if it won't accept the permit. Okay. So at some point, then it'll be changed over to the contractor. Once that contract is awarded, then and his name will go into the system. But you're going to need that before the correct permit fees are established and the permit's issued. We need a contract.
Correct.
And at that point, then everybody, if there's any communication after that goes in that file, everybody will be notified. Okay. Going into the next one, the next question we had was the uploaded documents. Again, I think it's important that everybody sees everything that is being uploaded. And I think that was for the applicant, owner, and the design professional. Everybody that's on that portal gets to see everything that's uploaded. The next question. Flip, I'm sorry. Or that with one question. Building for engineering, when the building, engineering, and cleaning, water, and public works departments reviewing documents in the tab and folder, there should be a timeline given. And I think that's very important to have in there that when we're doing that, we have 73% of us said that that we should have one in there, the reviewer's name, the information of who's reviewing the project, as well as the date of completion. I think that's very important for one, so we have an idea. It's very transparent on when they're working on it and when we should be getting it back. And it also works for the applicant and design professional that you would have to know that, okay, in a week or 2 weeks, I'm going to be getting this review letter, so now I can plan my schedule around receiving that from the parish and move it forward.
I think everybody knows that's an estimated date of completion because of the fact that Woodridge is the line between the line and the expansion. It's not a true deal.
But you're correct. I think that works both ways. I mean, I think we just have to have some sort of established date, and whether that review needs additional time or he's waiting on the applicant. And that's the follow-up question is, should there be a time frame on the applicant? That was another question asked. So when that plan reviewer releases those comments, should it be a time frame left on the applicant? Should the applicant respond back in 7 days or for 21 days or no time frame? What's the responsibility of the applicant to the parish, and how will we keep that flow of communication going? And as you see, everybody has kind of thought about the 21-day process, okay? So when you get your review letter, now you have the 21 days to respond, and at that point, what happens? Does the permit revert back to non-status? Does it go on what happens at that point if you don't fulfill your 21-day comment, okay? State Fire Marshal has that on us now. When they release for additional information, they put a 21-day time frame for us for a design professional to reply back.
But an awful lot depends on what the bulk of the planner or the permitter or whoever, is requiring you to get. In a lot of cases, if you've got an older property and you don't have a current survey, you got to go out and get another survey. That may take a month to get a new survey. Or, you got to come up with all kinds of different things in certain situations that it's difficult to put a timeline on.
Well, it's not really, because at that point you would say the plan review will come back and say, hey, you submitted a permit, you submitted the survey, and it's 10 years old, now you want within the 5-year period. Then your design professional would write a letter. You put a comment in there, calling the SWAM review. Look, I got your message. We just started our survey. It's going to take us 2.5 months to get it. So this is where we are. So now the plan review also knows that this project goes on the shelf. It sits over here waiting for your survey to come in. Okay? So as long as you communicate with everybody, I mean, I don't think that it's not cast in stone. You got to have that you're responding in 21 days or you're paralyzed. But if you got to have something in there telling them the reason why or what you're doing, so it's just not left it's not just left open.
In the queue. So I guess, I'm sorry.
The common problem that I have is that on a plan review on the residential side, they keep on adding to the requests. Well, this is not on there, that's not on there. And so it's keeps on delaying a project instead of giving me one list upon submittal of this is what you don't have that needs to be included. I know it. It's another question coming up. How many times do they get to add on? Drives my projects at submittal to completion to get the new construction building permit out 6 weeks. And they keep on adding or requesting what needs to be added to the plan.
And can he hit on one of your questions in the future, which is the list of information requested by each department, what they need? So there's a directing to everyone, whoever is applying for a permit, because not everybody understands the permit process, to be able to know what they have to provide so that it is not the back and forth that he's talking about, which we all had. And it's not an intentional thing, but the problem is something gets left out, you got to go back and have to get it. And you could be waiting 3 or 4 or 5 extra weeks in time.
On the design professional, because they got other things to do.
Exactly.
So I keep on nickel and diming this guy. I'm getting a bill every time because Jefferson Parish is not giving me my chocolate. So, or what's not missing in the front.
Right.
All right, on question 11, the intake for parking. Now, this is something that Brent and I talked about. Would it be something that we had a person that reviews the application, sort of like with the surveys and the different things, so you're not waiting for a review process to find out? That it was the person in the parish that reviewed the application will receive a completeness, and then assigned the plan reviewer. So what we're talking about there is that when a permit is submitted and they look up, they say, oh, gee, now you got a survey that's 10 years old. This is not going to work. You need to get this right. So it does not even go to a plan reviewer until you have all the proper documents in your form. And that would help, that would be sort of like in your situation where now you're getting this checklist and somebody looked at it and says, wait, you're missing this, this, and this. You can't even go into a permit review process until these documents are fulfilled.
Agree with that, except that needs to have a timeline. They should have a timeline? Well, yeah, if they're going to review it. I mean, how long are they going to take? Right?
So we all think that's a good process to have somebody in there to check it, look at the documentation, and move it on to the next phase.
Charles, can I ask kind of a dumb question? Doesn't that add to the bureaucracy? Now, like, if the plan reviewer doesn't have the ability to review it upon submission, now we're going to insert another layer of review before it even gets there.
Well, they're not really reviewing it. I mean, all they looking for is that survey.
No, I understand that, but I guess in my opinion, and I don't admittedly go through the process like these folks, but that's just now another person that has, a role in this process. And you would think that the plan reviewer should be able to, if this is just administrative checking the boxes, the plan reviewer ought to be able to do that upon submission and quickly respond that these things are missing. And I'm just asking the question. I don't know.
See, I think that would take that work of that plan, as plans reviewer gets that going, so he starts opening up your drawings and start looking at it, and you don't have the survey, or you don't have this, or you don't have that in it. What does he do with those plans? He roll them up to put them on the side, and now he's doing something else. So now, and it takes you now 2 months to respond, okay? So now the plan reviewer's got this huge set of documents that he's reviewing. It's going to take a week. He doesn't get to your project but 3 weeks later, and you're now calling everybody on the 10th floor saying how long the project taking. So if you would have been told on day one that you're missing this, this, and this, and we can't even start the review, then those are the documents that are missing. And now when it gets to the plan review, can he go from A to B without having interruption?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question, is if you go through an intake department, then the plan reviewer gets it with a sign off that everything's in the package.
Right.
Then you would think it should be easy.
It should be. Now he's just looking for code deficiencies.
Yeah.
He's looking for issues that are not addressed as code, but he's not looking at those initial documents.
That's what I was gonna say. I think you're definitely adding a layer, but the hope would be that layer speeds the person who you don't want a plan reviewer who's more professional or who trains or reviewing code items. Yeah, don't have to say that a survey is too old or the small things that should have been caught. The other thing, and no, all of this. Yeah, we're trying to solve some problems that create elements. On the time clock. I think for the parish to say when there's a comment back to whoever's responded, that should say pause. Because it's, if it takes 21 days or it takes you 2 months to respond, that's on whoever's responded. I don't know what the plan reviewer, they should know. I don't need to touch this. Because I think everything that we're trying to help is to move things through the system fast, to not get bogged down. Because that's usually, at least where we see problems. So I think we just need to be fair to both sides that they get to say that this is on pause until somebody responds to my questions.
Well, didn't you have an conversation, maybe I'm crazy, that we were suggesting at one point in time that on this website, Jefferson Parish, have the average time from submittal to get a construction building permit would be put on the website. I think we lobbed that up, didn't we?
Yes, we said it would be an
Average time from submittal to execution to get a building permit. I think that would be helpful because expectation is everything. If I knew it was going to take 6 weeks and that website say average time is 6 weeks, I won't be so anxious at week 4 and 5.
I think that's kind of hard to do because it all depends on the person that's putting an application in. I mean,
I agree, right? What the average time couldn't still be up there.
So it's in an average time on somebody who doesn't know how to put the application in, and you're getting all the comments back. You don't have the right survey, you don't have the right driveway information, you don't have the right that. I mean, that delays your projects.
Or if you don't respond, right? We're just talking about how long we don't have a response.
That's a hard thing to say. Gee, every compliance and this affirmative to Jefferson Parish is just going to take 8 weeks to get it from start to finish, but you got an applicant that disappears or don't respond or don't do that, then it's going to take longer than that.
I'm saying the average.
Well, one last thing on this too, in response to Jerry's comment, I would tell you that I don't know the workload of the reviewers, but let's look at the workload of the reviewers before we start adding another layer of people that somebody can do the job, take care of that same thing.
Okay. All right, moving on to our next question, where each department provided an outline of an outline of their review process and which required in their review. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let's go back it up. To be able, another question that came up throughout the emails was that it's very difficult to get a meeting with the parish, one of their reviewers, to schedule an in-person or Zoom meeting with a planner or a website-based scheduler. And 86% agree that that's a needed thing. I do think that's needed. I mean, if an applicant needs to answer a question or is confused about the process or don't understand the portal, I think it's important for them to be able to get an in-person or Zoom or whatever they want to do, put a meeting in front of somebody at the parish in order to help them down through that process. I know I know the reviewers have their schedule, but I think if they could set some time, it doesn't have to be every hour of the day, but set something aside where they could schedule with the applicant on that. All right, next question is for each of the department to provide a review of their process, and I think most of us agree with that. I think that if we had a white paper or outline of exactly what we required from every department, what they're looking for on their drawings, what is the applicant's responsibility, I think that will take some of that guesswork out of Sabines, a set as accurate to the parish for review. A lot of the emails came back with landscaping as an issue at the end of a project, okay? There's a lot of times that the landscape doesn't go in exactly like the landscape drawings that were submitted and approved, and there's issues that come up at the end of a project. So would it be good to arrange a pre-conference site visit with the parish and the installer and the owner to get understanding of what the landscape requirement is and what's going to be needed before they go ahead and install all the landscaping. And I think we agree that that's an important role. The last question we have is when we're working in the overlay districts, okay, where you're involved, especially on Metairie Road or in Bass City area, and some of these overlay districts where you have a lot of neighbors that get involved in this process. Should there be a neighborhood participation need? I mean, the design professionals that work in the city of New Orleans is familiar with this neighborhood participation meeting, and I see a lot of this don't go think it's needed. I've been during the neighborhood participation meetings in the city, and I think it's an important process. It's a step that the neighbors get that chance to express their opinion. And as a design professional, there may be another workaround, or you visit the neighbors that this is good for the area before you get in front of a BTA board or another board that now there's a big argument and everybody is not happy. And I think this neighborhood participation meeting could help resolve some of those issues.
Well, just to kind of comment on that, the way the question's written, it sounds like any project in any overlay should need an NPP or whatever call it. I think if you're going for a zoning change or a use change or a BZA short, have a neighborhood meeting, but some of the things that's kind of bogged that process down in the ordinance parish is just every project having a neighbor participation meeting, whether it's needed or not, and definitely not trying to say that we shouldn't have adjacent homeowners or property owners involved. Just very careful about it, really slowing down that process, and that's not needed. Obviously, if you're changing zoning, of course, anything I think where you want to another BZA or zoning change or re-subdivision, sure, so you should probably have that meeting. But it's a lot of work on whoever's running the meeting and setting it up and cost. And I think we should be careful about just. I agree. I agree. And I'm not saying at all that we shouldn't involve neighbors, but just be careful.
Yeah, I would just say there's a big difference between requiring and suggesting, and depending on the project. I don't think we want to put the onus on businesses that every project they do in one of these areas, they have to go before the neighborhood groups. But we've all been through it enough times that we know it goes much smoother when they do, depending on the project. But I would hate to put that onus on businesses from the outset. That is just another regulation that they're required to do.
I'm surprised on the seeing the signature. I thought people would want more community interaction before it gets to a meeting stage. Because, when a lot of times, at least at this, what I see from planning advisory board, is that neighbors don't even know it's happening. Like that's the first time they see it, and a lot of the stuff gets worked out with my boards, and it really should, a lot of the times it really should happen at the community days. So I'm not saying that every project should have it. They should have some type of mechanism that said which projects are required to have and which ones aren't. The little ones that are insignificant, that shouldn't. I don't think it should be on there. But for like an Ochsner Children's Hospital, that should have had it. So the need to be kind of outlaid in the community first, which I think they tried. It's just they didn't have a real a structure to do. That's all I know.
Depended on every complexity of every submission.
Right.
And I think just be real quick to both your guys' points. The question makes it tough to answer. There's so many dynamic situations. As the business guy who's tried to get a single sign changed out, I have to go through that review. As a more complex project, of course, the neighbor should be involved because I'm a neighbor as well where I live. I think challenges for the smaller things being included in the you must have on everything scenario is time rate. You apply, you get on the agenda, and then if the agenda is too full, you're pushed another month. It's a month increment, which is detrimental to cost of business. So for me, I don't know how you solve it because everyone's busy is tough, but it's the ability to be pushed indeterminately in perpetuity that makes it very tough to your business.
I had my own more thing to add there. So first of all, you have to make decisions on what's important, what's not important. So who's doing that? Who is making that decision? That's number one. Number two is every time you involve this in the process, which is what you see 78%, you have to delay it. We're here to try to simplify the process and make it easier. Yet we're adding another layer of stuff that we have to deal with. And look, I get it. And some, like you said, some construction projects require that. But I would say that the majority of our projects don't. So in essence, I would tell you that the 78% up there's a reason for it, is because we're trying to simplify, not increase.
Could the planning advisory board just table the item and recommend that project have a meeting? If Ochsner came to that, if the Ochsner project were coming along, and during the planning advisory board meeting, you're getting all this pushback, couldn't they just table that item and say, we recommend y'all have a community outreach meeting?
No, we did.
So I think that would be the process.
I think too, like with these bigger projects that we're talking about, Eric, which is patient.
If you don't want to,
no matter what we do, like an Ochsner does or Cornerstone or some of these, they might be doing the outreach, but they might never get satisfaction from that neighborhood group. So it's, they feel like they've met that community engagement piece, and how far do they have to go when they're never going to get the approval of the neighborhood or whatever, or a small group of people. So
I say at 100%, right, Ruth?
Right, yeah. It never. So I think that, to Jerry's point and several others, I think making it a requirement is going to be difficult on businesses and others, just lengthens the process.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, because I know I proposed recently having a neighborhood participation meeting. So this is really valuable feedback. And it's to the point that you were making. A lot of times when it gets to the PAB, your council people start getting the calls because neighbors haven't heard about it ahead of time. All of a sudden they're in a tizzy because there's a ticking clock on how it's moving through the process. So yes, often PAB will defer it. There's still a limited time frame you have at that point to work within, because if you have a drop dead date, well, you have to act. But often it's the people at this table that will call us frustrated when it gets deferred, because you're like, I mean, my time frame, to your point, another month down line, you usually buy. So originally, the thought was on those limited projects that are sophisticated, changing zoning, not everything, do we require a neighborhood meeting before you apply? So that you're not, right before you apply, when you have some meat on the bones of your project and go to the neighborhood, so that you get that feedback on the front end, because it often is worked out with the neighbors. You're never going to satisfy 100%. But the thought definitely was, on a big, potentially controversial project, do you have one meeting immediately prior to submitting your application with us, so you get that feedback from them? They can't say, I didn't hear about this, didn't know about this, before they're in a tizzy. So that was the thought. Definitely not adding a layer of bureaucracy. But if there's any consideration, would it be in specific, more complex cases where there would be a recommendation or a requirement, and that's where your feedback is going to be important. Do we do it at all? Do we not do it? Do we do it in a limited scenario so that it doesn't create the tizzy of people calling our offices in a panic because they feel like they weren't brought in more on the front end? So that really, I just wanted to make sure bureaucracy is definitely not the goal. If we can short circuit the chaos that sometimes comes in the process by not having had a meeting, that would be the only thought.
And we're doing, sometimes we do recommend some revisions when they come to the PAD, but we can only do so much if they don't know the project beforehand. You know, you've got a number of neighbors that didn't know about it. They just heard about it the day before, and they got a call from their neighbor and like, let's go out to council meeting, and then they show up, and we got a barrage of people that don't know what the project's all about, and they don't get a full schematic on the project. Because the planning part only they colorize the graphics, but they don't give the color of what the project is really about. You know, a lot of times it's really dulled down to just a zoning kind of colored maps. Yeah, but they don't get the renderings and the niceties that maybe a project might have that they didn't know about before. They don't get that opportunity to look at the full. There you go.
But sometimes it just doesn't matter because they don't want that in their backyard. And that's the approach.
I think if you require a meeting, you're still going to have the people calling the council office and say, well, I didn't know about the meeting. Like, I think you're always going to have these people. And yes, you could say, okay, well, we had a meeting, but I think that that's already done in these big projects when they go and meet with the community and they have these community outreach meetings and, you know, oh, we gave the opportunity for X, Y, and Z. And I think we have all seen it in parish situations, you know, where the parish has asked for input for the community and people don't show up until the council meeting in which it's voted on. So I think that it just puts another onerous on the business and on those neighborhood meetings too. I think on the agenda, I think it would be difficult.
Well, they just had a apartment complex on Latalco, you know, that happened. The neighbors really didn't know what was going on there. Like that's why we deferred a number of times, but they weren't clued in at all. The developer just wasn't forthcoming. He was from out of town. He just didn't have the means, and that was one project that kind of, you know, it was a hard, you know, kind of outlet.
Right. But it didn't matter because they took it to court. Well, you know, everybody didn't want it, including the council and whatnot. And, you know, so now he's got to go ahead. I'm just surprised that the parish isn't taking a position to appeal the decision.
What that's beyond. Well, I think the one thing you little in so there's a whole set of code of ordinances, zoning, and everything else. If you're a property owner and what you're proposing by right meets all of those, you know, setbacks, heights, use, you're now adding another layer that's not part of zoning. That's saying that if the neighbors don't necessarily agree with the proposal, you can't do it. I think that's where you could get into yeah, some legal issues because you have zone. It's an ordinance by law. If you're building something by right, again, larger projects, that makes sense.
Be plus values. In this scenario, there were grants and low interest loans, so it was funded. A significant portion was funded by the citizens of Jefferson Parish, and the citizens of Jefferson Parish didn't want the project, but funds are still being directed to the project. I mean, clearly, this guy's coming out ahead to tune of millions and millions of dollars over 10 years. It was a lot of tax dollars, and he said, "Yeah, I did 15 million."
I think we're talking about a small percentage, little submittal.
Yeah, and everything. Let's not even focus down that rabbit hole. Should never be a requirement. Suggestion, yes, but it depends on the complexity of that individual project. I think 97%, not a rough.
Agree.
I agree. Okay, yeah, we totally understand Councilman Van Branken and all council people's issues that they get from anybody trying to do those kind of things in their district. Get it. But at the same time, there should be a parameter that's established to make that happen. Not just the fact that you're trying to do a project and 25 people out of 1,000 decide they don't want it in their backyard, as was said earlier. I mean, it's just another delay and another added burden that we're trying to get beyond so we can make it simple. And for you guys too, I mean, to make the thing roll smooth. That's what this is all about.
You know, but sometimes that doesn't cause, Billy. You know, if this is brought up in the beginning and you spend that 1 month going through the process, getting the neighbors and everything, when you get to that point, when you at that BCA hearing and you got the neighbors in and say, "Hey, I haven't heard anything about this first time I'm doing it," and then the board defers it, now we're a month behind. Well, then it gets deferred again. So you could spend more time in a BZA hearing being deferred than you would be in the beginning. And there's a lot of times at the neighborhood participation meetings, it's in the beginning of the drawing. So, I mean, sometimes your design professionals can work with the neighbors and give those neighbors, give them that have the feeling of that they have their input. They have some contribution to what's going on in their backyard. And sometimes it makes it easier for these neighbors to accept it. And when you get, then there's no problem when you get the BZA. There's no deferral, everything goes along smoothly. And at the end of the day, you could actually move the process through the system quicker.
I'm telling you, the apartment case, if we would have known before, is they would have had a meeting, and it would have gone a lot sooner. So it would have we would have deferred. We were going into that first meeting like I was like, this is not that bad of a project, and then we get into the meat of it of actually what is happening, and we had to defer it a number of times because the actual community clued us in once. That was because that was the first time they had really seen it. So if they would have had that meeting beforehand, then everything could have been aired out, or at least the major problems would have been aired out, and we would have had all the information for that first meeting.
I can appreciate that, but I think if most sophisticated people who are doing these bigger projects that require neighborhood input, if they fail to do that and it gets delayed, that then becomes the business's problem. It's not a permitting process. The thing we're trying to solve here, I think, is this process. If the business fails to do it, that's their problem. It's not a problem of this process. I think we're trying to improve.
Trying to design a system that smooths that, and you know what? Sometimes become always, and that's what we're talking about here.
I mean, I lived in Rio Vista, and I got the notifications on the Rio Vista Facebook group of all their meetings, and I guarantee you, the same people that were posting as Rio Vista are against this and there were the same people complaining at the very end. You know, so I mean, it just to add something like that to everybody, which I think it would go against trying to put there.
When we're trying to limit the unknowns are always the hindrance to development, and part of why we're here as a committee is that limit those unknowns, try to help with. Or part of the reason, not the whole reason. So just, I don't want to add more to it.
Unknowns equal less cash to everyone.
I think to Peter's point and what most people are saying here goes back to the first meeting where the parish in the past had gone to the reference city of Franklin, Tennessee. And if the council, I think the board wants, I've developed in Franklin, Tennessee, and I have a local architect who's willing to answer our questions and talk. If we want to do that as part of this group and give us some insight. But this all goes back to communication both ways and accountability. Right communication, you have right accountability going both ways. So the more we can establish whether we'd like the requirement or not, because we're all going to disagree on something, on the front end with perhaps that meeting, the outline dissertations, then the parish could hold us accountable for doing our part and vice versa. So I think the front end burden creates a downstream effect of more efficiency for everybody. Parish is going to get less calls, less questions, less update requests, less comments. You can say, hey, please refer back to the notes on our initial meeting. This is what we established we need, and put it back on us.
All right, any more comments on the neighborhood participation should be?
You have your percentages on the screen right.
Yes, on that.
Hi, I'm Rachel Berg. I'm in the city of New Orleans, and we as Palio at MEE support mutual uses, uses, experiences, except for single family. And we're also doing a study around release barriers, and we identify LED process as being a barrier. And so we're trying to raise the kids to provide the process. And because we've heard from multiple developers that it costs of time within a literal cost, but thousands of dollars to send out the invitation to end up of your like 10 meetings, visual endurance products. So I just wanted to bring on up and like where we're going and the OD's airship process. She's one come through those bigger projects or conditional uses. So she just does nothing. We want to reduce some first, but it's probably a little rectangle.
Thank you. It definitely seems like what we're usually talking about is large multifamily developments. I mean, that's always going to be what typically gets the most property owners outraged. Or dollars, tax dollars being involved. Grant money or bonds of some kind also causes a lot of public outrage. And that's a very small percentage of projects, very small.
Right. Ms. Berg, what limitations are y'all putting on the MPP process in Orleans, or are y'all looking at?
For example, so Parish has the Zulu and 2 counties already sent. We want to increase around all the smaller multi-county developments have to go through the review process, and he's assigned that level just up under your renter, so it's very matter of what kind of development is, as long as there are renters involved on it. We want to make housing opportunities more available, so we're trying to date our ways to streamline that process. And then for certain conditional use projects, we're but you want to try to move the NED process for those. These are all things that you're discussing, nothing is subtle or 5 by, and these are, right how everything is just, in this country case. But we have just identified guide, the MPQ process is in an FSL, the barrier. And so, the tech is still under review. We're just trying to remove them as much as.
You're not getting rid of the process altogether. You're still going to have it on a limited basis, right?
Right, yeah. No, and but definitely with you to Avir, it could be for Android as only changes conditional uses and variances, just you remove the and add those types of projects that can be extended, such as a sea looking pay. But we don't have any processes for like design reviews. First, we actually do have one now for somebody. So you said create over a certain number of bots, and we're also trying to maybe reduce that a bit too. Again, we're just hearing that processes were the onerous to development, and CCD are also looking at streamlining processes. So it could be
Okay. Yeah, that's some stick box.
All right, let's move. We had conversation. We had the questions about the timeline, posing timeline, both going the parish review process and the applicant turning their comments. Let's open up some discussions on the timeline process.
So I'll start. Yeah, on projects, the time it takes for a reviewer to review a project, and they give you back comments. Nowadays, there's other agencies that enforce timelines on getting information back to the jurisdiction, or you have where you have the availability that your project's going to get kicked out of the system, right? So at the state fire marshal has 21 days. We submit drawings to the state fire marshal. If you don't find any kind of responses or any kind of feedback, they kick your project out in 21 days. Is that something that you as a group, do we feel that that's something that Jefferson Parish should take a swing at?
I think that's probably asking a lot, because that would also, there might be homeowners at the end of response when you like. So for the fire marshal, it gets a little different. It's a professional record. If you're an architect or engineer, you know that you can call them and ask them the cause it if you just can't get the response back. I think 21 days to get pause it, but I mean, fire marshal, they kick it back. You have to resubmit and pay it up the again. If we said something like that, I think you would get some homeowners and people that would be a call.
Wait a minute, maybe it's not 21 days. Yeah, I'm just referencing that. Yeah, some time period though.
Yeah. 21 is, and even farmers, but it's like you did that. There's times where
I think every situation is unique. I mean, I think if you need additional time, you can just ask. I mean, if that's something that you just ask for. But I think that for is to go away and not respond, and 3 months, 4 months later, you send your response in, and you expect something to happen in a week. That's
that would be so. If there were, because I believe LURTEC has a 7 days to respond, right? 7 days to review. Building permit does not have that time limit. If there were something where, okay, plan reviewers have a certain set of days to respond, and then if we don't hit respond in those 21 days, when we respond, maybe it doubles their length to respond. So that they give us comment, we give it within 21 days, they have 5 days to respond. If we wait over 21 days, maybe that time goes to 14 days for them to respond. Basically, like penalizing, and hey, if you don't respond to this, it's going to the bottom of my stack on my desk.
Smart.
I agree with that. I agree that there needs to be accountability again both ways. Kicking out and reapplying, I think, is excessive and unfair. But going back to the user batch and queue, I think is very reasonable.
I think in some situations it depends on the planner's comments. The planner says, well, you got to get an updated this, you need that, that may, the developer or the owner, they say, well, wait, what's this going to cost? What is that going to cost? Why do I need this? Can I substitute something? Which kind of brings me to the question, if you're dealing with a planner on a project, does that planner have the authority to approve the project, or does it have to kind of keep going up the ladder? Anybody know? Anyone?
That's an asked question.
It's a best question. Generally, the planner themselves do not have the authority to approve any projects. It is a ministerial project, something that that's not requiring variances, that can be approved by the planning department and signed out on my knee. I review it before I approve it.
So, hang on, let me interrupt you. Are you saying that the planner has within his authority the right to approve or disapprove a project? Or does the planner have to submit it to you or supervisor to get approved?
Right, so if it is ministerial, meaning that it does not have a variance and cannot approve at the ministerial stage, at the planning department, it comes to me ultimately for approval. The planner does the review, they manage it through the LURTEC process, they draft the report for my review and prepare the plans for my signature, but ultimately, under the code and say, oh, I believe it, the planner does not have the authority to approve it, is with the planning director. If it is a legislative case, something that has a variance, requires council approval, and it has, of course, go to the parish council before we sign off.
And I understand that, and I'm just trying to make sure that that everybody clearly understands. Even in a situation where it's a straight, no variance, no nothing, you still have to approve it. Because the planner doesn't have the authority to approve it. I mean, the comments I get was, well, I've looked at everything, but I got to send it up to see if anybody else has got any comments. And who's the other person? Well, that's the supervisor and maybe the director, and that tends to take an enormous amount of time. And I can cite you some specific cases.
And we can discuss
Okay.
if there's a...
So, but I mean, you've answered my question. You are the person that makes the decision, period. Whether you're there or not, is there somebody else that can make the decision? If you're out
there, the assistant director has the authority to decide as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
I would just say the other thing.
Let me just. I think that's a problem. I mean, you've got a lot of developers, a lot of stuff going on, and if you have one person is the person that makes the decision, I mean, why are we hiring supervisors and all these other people? I mean, are they not qualified? Do they not know how to read? They ought to be able to give you an approval without having to go through a layer of people to get the approval. I think that's a big problem. And I think Parish needs to recognize that. That has been problematic for a lot of people. From a commercial standpoint, I don't do residential, so I don't know what you guys have to deal with along those lines, but to have to go through a whole series of stuff if your planner says, hey, everything looks good, but I can't approve. That's my comment. Sorry for raising my voice, but I'm very, very bitter about that.
What ends up, but from another standpoint, I mean, there's also other businesses. Let's take, just we use another example, that you have staff that's working for you, and you go through and the staff prepares all their reports and everything, but that report don't get issued until that CEO or that supervisor or somebody reviews it and make sure it's correct. You just don't let staff.
If it's different, in other words, let me use a very simple situation. If I walk into a retail store and they got a sale and they say, look, all this stuff on the table is available for sale, the person who's running that show ought to be able to have the ability to make a decision. But more than likely, if I offer $10 for something that they want $20 for, he or she's got to go someplace else. But if I offer you what you want for it, why do you have to check with somebody else? And that's what this situation is. If my planner looking at my project said, yeah, everything's up to date, why does it have to go up the line? To a supervisor, then to a director, and who knows who else? That's time delay. Because that supervisor, that director may be involved in 5,000 other things. And I don't know how many applications come through the planning department every day, but my understanding is there's a lot. So if that's the case, I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. In a week, in a month. I just feel like that's something that needs to be addressed. And I think if it's a matter of not having qualified planners, then maybe we need to look at hiring qualified planners, people that know what the hell they're doing. If you're just hiring order takers, that's a waste of time. Why do you need 500 people in a department if only one person can make a decision?
Now, Gus, is that a governmental thing that you have to approve everything? There's no one else that unilaterally that can do that?
So I think we may be using the term approve a little too broadly. When it comes to me for my signature, it is not that I do the full LURTEC review all over again before signing it. I review the report, I review the plans. That can take maybe 5 to 10 minutes, especially if it is a ministerial case, because those are generally very simple. So when we say approve at my stage, it is just that I'm familiarizing myself with the project and then I sign off on it. The reason that it goes to the supervisor for reading comes to me, and not all of them do, is to make sure that the supervisor is aware of what has occurred as well. She does the same thing. It is not the full review that we do with LURType, right? But it's the planners who in the heavy lifting with that review. So the supervisor is not approving it. She's an issue that she has looked at it. There are no other concerns that she has, and then it comes to me for signature. I'm obviously more than willing to talk to you about whatever cases you had that there was seemingly a lag or a delay.
But what you're saying is you have to approve everything.
Under the code, I am the signatory authority.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted some clarity.
That is
The planners don't have the authority to approve it. The supervisors don't have the authority to approve it. Even if it meets all the requirements, it's got to go to you for approval.
It has to come to me for signature.
That's how we could.
Right, that is in our unified fellow vote. Yes, as a ministerial case. In the same way that it has to go to the council for approval, it has to go to the PAD before it can go to the council. There are certain things set in place within the code to ensure that a appropriate review is taking place.
And I think this would go to Ms. Chet, maybe Chet. But I think, in my opinion, the plan reviewers, where they get paid.
Their starting salary is roughly about 38 to 39,000 a year to start.
Okay. What are they required to know? How many telephone books of knowledge within 12 months they have to pass the test?
Oh, well, there's a plan reviewer, one position that is either or, commercial or residential. They have to learn the international code for whatever, residential or commercial.
Let's say residential. How many pages is that?
Over 500, maybe 550 pages. It goes from the foundation to the root.
Right. So how long do they have to take a test on that information, or no? They all have to take a test.
They have to take a test on that entire book, yes.
So
For residential plan reviewers, yes.
the planner hasn't even seen that
No,
until they come to work for you.
the plan reviewer,
Right. I'm sorry, the plan reviewer.
a lot of times, no, they have not. They have not taken the test. They're not certified yet. They have a year to get the test passed.
And if they don't pass the test,
If they don't pass the test, we lost a year of training someone and trying to get them to pass the test.
is it what? Go ahead. Is that test open book?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So you got a residential plan reviewer. You got to pass 500 pages in a year. So you allow them to study on the clock or off the clock?
Oh, of course.
On the clock.
We buy books. We allow them to study. We have resources such as people like me and Sal and Hall that can sit and help them interpret and learn code, yes.
This is just my opinion. You're paying someone $38,000 to pass a test, 500 pages, in 12 months. If he fails the test, he or she fails the test, they're gone, right?
They're fired. Yes.
Fire. Okay. What's the longest tenured plan reviewer you have on staff right now?
26 years.
Okay, and second would be?
Well, oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot about Mr. George. Mr. George is about 40 years, and then we have Tom Scott, who 26 years.
How frequently is the turnover in plan review?
I'd say at least once to twice a year we have to hire you plan reviewers.
And that takes another 12 months for training to learn 500 pages. That's just on a residential and commercials. 2 telecom books. Maybe.
Commercials are a bit larger, yes, but yes.
So we're paying someone $38,000, which I think is way low, to have that position. That's the front representation of getting a permit. And they are reviewing plans week 2 of them.
Oh no, They're not.
When they start reviewing plans from first logging in, getting that position?
Maybe 2 months.
2 months,
Roughly about 2 months.
they get my plan.
And they'll start reviewing on their own with, of course, asking questions. Typically, a plan reviewer at least has to be there 2 years before they feel absolutely comfortable without asking any questions.
If they pass the test.
If they pass the test within that first year.
So the year 2, they still getting 38,000.
Year 2, they're probably maybe 5% more than that, maybe 10 by then, if they got a good review, yeah.
So if I get the guy that's new, 2 months in, set of plans, engineering, you think there's going to be problems with me getting that plan back because he's a new guy? There's going to be certain delays.
That's, of course.
I think the starting salary personally is way too low to get qualified people to want to come to be in that position. I don't know if we have more money to pay, but I think the crux of all this, personally, in my experience, is that the plan reviewers, sometimes you get good ones, sometimes you get bad ones, or if you get a bad one, they get 10 bites of the apple. Chance you need all this. 2 weeks later, I need this. 3 weeks later, I need that. I'm going on pulling my hair. I think the starting salary is way too low to have someone responsible enough, because two months ago, he didn't know a set of plans.
Well, he should have. We have requirements in order to get hired.
Okay.
I mean,
you still have to go to the training and process and procedures of Jefferson Parish code enforcement. I just think we set ourselves up for failure on day one, paying someone $38,000, expecting to know the volume to be efficient at executing a building permit.
We don't have the capacity, and I'm not familiar with hiring process of people that's out there, but we can't hire people that have much more experience and are familiar with the 500 pages. There's nobody out there that is familiar with the 500 pages.
I mean, the average, if you really think about the average person that has the technical knowledge, they may have, I don't know, at least an associate's degree is one of our requirements for the job, and at least 5 years of construction experience. A lot of times, a man that's 38, a woman 30, 38, 40, has a household, a house note, children, private school, car note. They can't afford to come.
So that, she said it right to his point. Point. It just seems like we're on the short end of the stick. We've got very complex set of rules and regulations and procedures to follow. And even the people that are supposed to be able to read those and understand those, they don't know them. And that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why we have so many delays and so many misunderstandings with regards to what's required, what's not required, so on and so forth.
And I do think Jefferson Parish puts themselves in a hole when the starting salary is 38 and they're supposed to know a vast amount of knowledge. I think I wouldn't want that job or responsibility to pass that or to learn that for $38,000 a year. You set yourself up, in my opinion, failure day one when they sit at that desk. Man.
So they add reinforcement to that. So I'm also on task force with Owens Parish and save them costs. Okay, Timmy Jackson has come to us at our one meetings asking us to find people to go work. Problem is across the board, and I think if the parish takes this in hand, as it's being said right now, it addresses the monetary issue and qualification issue, of course, then the reality is we end up with a system that's going to work better in the future.
More efficient.
And that's right. And that's where we're about this.
So I got a question. This 39,000 for someone who is not certified, what does the narrative pay for someone who already gets certified?
Well, I've actually seen where someone comes in with a certification and they're, there is a 5 to 10% I've seen.
That's not enough, is what we're saying, is to change. That's the first level right there.
And I do think
if you increase the salary, attract more qualified people that has a 4-year degree, someone that has some ability to use their brain, because listen, the pool of people we're going to get for 38,000 to slow my project, to slow all of our projects up, we're losing a lot of money trying to train them making 38,000.
And inversely goes through a year of training, working for Jefferson Parity, and does become certified, should immediately trust significant on income. So they have the motivation to do that. They have a future.
That's all I gotta say on that.
Got veered off, but I do have one thing on this. So, you the sense your arguments, so if I from memory, if you flip back out there, the timeline, if there's going to be a timeline created, then maybe there needs to be a tab for the reason for an extension that is needed, because, and everybody here knows it, and design professionals as well, is that if a change is required to the plans, and you have to have the time to get the change done, make sure the builder understands, or whoever it is, make sure they understand what they need to do, and the owner is in the process, then that can go with 21 days very easily.
Yeah.
So that to me, if we have a tab that can be a reason for an extension where we're not going back to a timeline, and sure we don't want to go back to the bad a lot, but at the same time, you're not losing the ability to be able to jump back in and get it done. I mean, I have concerns with that.
Well, but I think that's an important point. You know, like I said, it's within that 21 days, somebody needs to communicate to that reviewer that it's going to take me longer than 21. So you're not being penalized, or you're not being put at the bottom. So now that reviewer knows that, Jake, he needs 2 months to get this done. At that point, he can plan this schedule and what his review is.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying it needs to be a part of the document so that there is a knowledge of the fact that it was done. Because if it's not, who says?
Well, I said either an email or a letter.
You know, I know.
Yeah. I document that conversation to make sure I can go back and.
I'm just saying if the timeline's provided, okay? Right. We have a drop down tab. Well, extend it, go, whatever. You got.
And that's on the NGO system. I mean, you all use an NGO system. I mean, that's
it's pretty simple. It's something though. It's not to answer your
question in talking about the responses, and that's in probably more to you all is, so we get a plan review letter, maybe it's got 50 questions, answers to 12. Does it make more sense for someone to respond to this? Well, begin to close that, or should we be waiting for everything to close it out? Because I've seen that before, where you're answering a lot of them, but there's not like, okay, yes, thank you. Almost all those are answered. Yep, truth, that's life. Like, what's the protocol for that? Like, I think that goes in the suggestions back to the applicant of how to respond with TICA.
Well, right now, we are actually working on a way to, when we send out read you comments, we're working, we actually write down, it actually was added last week, for applicants to click on the link in that email and actually make comments back and forth, so that the plan reviewer doesn't have to constantly refer back, hey, let me see if there was any uploads. Let me see that it'll automatically,
No, that actually, that answers that question. That's a really good, yes. So very, very good. Very, that's thank you.
I have a question on number 14, I think. I'm going back to that real quick, just on the landscaping. I think, the free conference having to be scheduled. I guess my question is, I thought whenever I saw like the breakdown of number of employees that we had, we only had like one landscape reviewer.
Yeah.
So then the real question is like, does this guy have the capacity to have pre-conferences with every single project? There's only one guy out there, and is that going to actually slow things down? So just wanted to make that comment.
Aren't the landscape requirements Class A trees, and it's broad, right? So it's like Class A, and it gives you classes of bushes and everything. Why
a number that you
the number? Why are we required to say what Class A tree we're putting in?
can it be approved with the list of all Class A trees? That way, when you go to build when you go to build it, and you go to you go to the landscape company and they don't have that tree, they can just swap it out for a different Class A tree and not go against the permit. So it should be approved with Class A tree here, there's many of them, space at this, just Class A tree, and then put a list of all Class A trees.
As long as you pay for the list.
Yeah, and the list is going to be on the landscape plan. It could be on the plan. Here's the list of what tree you pick.
Right.
Who establishes the criteria for landscaping requirements? Is there a person? Is there a rule?
Who sets that? Is it ordinance? I'm sorry. Yeah, it's an ordinance in the zoning code, and planning helps with writing the verbiage for that ordinance.
Okay, I would strongly suggest whoever is involved in that take a look at some of the requirements. I mean, we're in a hurricane area here. Why do you want to plant a whole bunch of trees around a building? I mean, something just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense.
It's beautification.
It's gonna look good.
Well, I mean,
Beautification your sake.
Well, it's also whether they're trying to designate trees that are native to South Louisiana.
and again, I just, the hurricanes at the end.
Design issue.
Well, see, your comment just now is why we need that pre-construction, that pre-site meeting in order to have everybody on board. Because what happens is the installer's out there, you got the landscape installer out there, you got the owner out there, and he goes, you don't want this tree, you want this kind of tree. You don't want that. No, we're going to split this up. Now the parish comes out for that final review and rejects everything. And now the design professional has got to go in front of the board to figure out how we're going to get this approved.
Right. Yeah.
So that one step's going to cut out that whole problem with landscape.
I'm just wondering if we have the capacity to do it. That would know.
Well, we used to have one guy called Bernie. That was the guy. Now we have Ian.
Bernie, I'll answer that one. Bernie and Ian are actually two different, obviously two different human beings, two different feet. Bernie was part of the Parkways Department, and Ian is part of the Planning Department. So the Parkways Department under Public Works has one landscape architect as well, arborist as well, and that's Maura, who replaced Bern. What she's looking for are trees on the right-of-way itself. So she is involved in the parish's right-of-way itself, and along with the type of trees, we're also looking at the location of the trees and the utilities underneath, because the last thing you want is to place your tree with a deep root system on top of a water line or a sewer line or a drain line that could impede the ability of that utility to function not just for you, but for the entire area that is serviced by that law.
All right, it's time. We're going to wrap this up. This next agenda coming up, the chamber is going to be making their presentation on surveys that they received. And the parish is going to bring us up to date on the new changes for the MOG for it. And still would like the rest of y'all who have not sent in your hot topics to do so. Yeah.
Good. Again, show the town.
And we're gonna present the new zoning map that's going to be launched with the parish at the next meeting.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.